After years of weighted pull-up specialization, I finally broke the 200-pound barrier. My new 1-rep max is 210 at a body weight of 165, bringing up my total to 375, just 25 pounds away from the legendary 400-pound mark, which is my ultimate long-term goal. Since 2022, my total has gone up by 40 pounds, or about 15 pounds per year. And at this rate, I'm on track to surpass 5 plates by next year. Not long ago, that would have been considered world class. But as I've said since 2017, the lats and upper back have the greatest upper body potential and the most room for progression. So even though back has always been my strongest body part, progress hasn't slowed down, at least not the way it's done so with other weaker muscles. So I'm genuinely excited about the future. I know I'm capable of more, and so are you. Now, to be fully transparent, that 210-pound rep wasn't the cleanest. I barely got my chin over the bar, if that. And some would say it doesn't even count, and I'll accept that. But this isn't a competition, and that wasn't even my strongest grip. I only just got started maxing out again on pull-ups, and either way, I'm officially in the 200-pound zone. I can hit that cleanly. It's fine. And that's what I was working towards. So in today's video, I want to share the exact methods that took me from 4 plates to about 4.5 plates. And best of all, how you could do it too. My number one advice is to train your weakest grip until it's no longer a weakness. What used to be your weakest grip can eventually match your strongest grip. And when that happens, it immediately unlocks a new checkpoint or even waves of instant PRs. So a lot of you have followed me for years and remember when I first hit a 4-plate pull-up. Back then, I was much stronger at pronated pulls. My weighted chin-ups lagged about 25 pounds behind, so there was a clear gap. I'd also never trained super wide grip pull-ups, and when I started doing them in 2022, I could barely hit a plate. So right away, my obvious weak links were identified, being all underhand grips, close to wide, in addition to super wide grip pull-ups, which have become a staple in my routine. While my close and medium pronated pull-ups were super strong. Therefore, to fix this imbalance, I completely stopped doing neutral grip pull-ups and close to medium pronated pull-ups for almost 2 years. Yes, you heard that right. They only came back in 2024. That long block changed everything. So when I say you got to correct your weaknesses, it's not going to happen in a couple months. It can take years in many cases, as it did for myself. But the super wides gave me what I call my second wave of lat puberty, almost like newbie gains. That's only happened to me twice in my lifting journey. So if there's one back exercise that's truly transformative, it's this one. The best part is, I originally started doing them because biomechanics gurus claimed they targeted the upper back and the teres major, which is what I was trying to build. But what ended up happening is that my back just kept getting wider and wider by accident. And that's when it all clicked. The old school greats were right. Frontal plane pull-ups do bias the lats, so they become a must-do for me. They've let me get more out of less weight for the past 3 years. And the best part is, you don't need much load to see massive growth, especially with controlled form. I would say 40% of the time, I'm cyborging it. I was mostly doing moderate reps with a bit over a plate and still making gains. Now, I can do 2 plates on super wide grip pull-ups for full range of motion, and that's easily a plate harder than other pull-ups, but again, that took 3 years to work up to. It's the hardest variation. Now, the main reason why they work so well is because they were the exact opposite grip of the narrower pulls I've been told to do and specialize in for years. For me, and very likely for you too, training your weakest opposite grip will unlock new gains. Whatever that may be, it doesn't have to be super wide, but if that's all you've done up until now, maybe because you discovered my videos when I made them popular, switch to close underhand. You don't need to take my exercise selection, just the principles. Pick the variations that you neglected. If you've always done medium grips, experiment with both close and wide. It can be either or. So I also started mixing in wide ring pull-ups because that's another variation I hadn't really dealt with, which reduces armpit overuse. And thankfully, I haven't had any problems in years. Now you think that the rotation of the rings helps your leverages so you can lift more, but no, it doesn't. It's kind of like why you're weaker on rope pushdowns compared to a bar. The rings are more unstable and pull in towards the sides, which affects the resultant forces at the elbow. There's less of a spreading component. Plus, you're pulling more vertically since there's no stopping point in the center. Recently, I got my moderate grip ring pull-up to 185 pounds, which is 20 pounds above my 2023 PR at the same body weight. And I never use more than 2 plates to build up to that. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. Most of you guys can develop a 4-plate 1-rep max on every grip with just 2 plates at the most if you use harder variations. Sounds like a bold claim, but the proof is in the pudding. In addition, I also ran a Chinup Specialization phase in 2024. I wanted to see if going all in on underhand pulls would finally bring up my biceps and top end strength, getting my chin over the bar. And it worked. Not necessarily because of carryover, but precisely because it corrected my weakness. When my underhand strength caught up, my top end grinding significantly improved, and it was automatic. So during my last shred, I built up to 185 on all chin-up variations, close, medium, and wide. That was the turning point. And I can still do it now, despite not training chin-ups in a while. My chin-ups finally matched my pull-ups, with the weakness being officially obliterated, and stayed that way ever since. So at the time, the only pull-up I kept in was behind the neck as a secondary exercise, which is a harder version of super wides. Here's the takeaway. Bring up your weakest grip to match your strongest grip, and your strongest pull-up automatically goes up. It's pretty simple and straightforward. You don't even have to train it, and as I have been a broken record for so many years now, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And I don't mean chasing weird variations because, for example, chin-ups aren't weird, they're not a trick, and for a lot of people, especially beginners, chin-ups are actually stronger than pull-ups. That wasn't true for me, but it clearly shows how these individual gaps can be. That's why I love frequently rotating grips. You get constant feedback on your weaknesses, which pull-ups you suck at. Keep a list. Track your 1-rep maxes and AMRAP PRs, and specialize in those for both max effort and hypertrophy. Personally, I stick with each variation for 3 weeks. That's my sweet spot. So I might do super wide grip pull-ups for 3 weeks, then super wide ring pull-ups, then any chin up, then wide neutral. That's a full 3-month block rotating 4 core difficult grips. And I promise by the end, your normal pull-up strength will be significantly stronger. It feels like a joke by comparison. And then you reanalyze your list and train your new week variations. Strength is strength, don't forget. So my secret is training it with a conjugate thought process and high intensity. That means maxing out regularly, training mostly with low reps in the 75 to 85% range, and always addressing where you get stuck, which for a lot of lifters will be the top. By the way, this is a given, but full range of motion should be your default. For hypertrophy work, you'll usually get an extra rep or 2 by using your whole back. Don't stress about whether it's 100% lat biased or not. What matters is that you're not shortchanging yourself with half reps that are difficult to track. And you'll actually improve the stimulus to fatigue ratio plus shoulder traction. Always let your arms hang fully straight in the bottom. And as a bonus, pause there for a split second, just like you would in a paused bench press. This reduces kipping momentum and thus instability, making it much less likely you'll swing the plates or lose that mind muscle connection in your back. By doing this, the total weight can oftentimes be heavier than a lat pull down, which proves force production is as high as it's ever going to be on a vertical pull, which should have been obvious given the fact that guys are maxing out on pull-ups all the time. So that's a side thing, but my message is master your technique and quit making excuses like, oh, pull-ups are unstable. No, you just got to clean up your technique. It doesn't take long, okay? Now to expand further, here's how this program played out right after my bulk. As many of you know, during the holidays, I let myself lose control. Non-stop gatherings more than once a week, eating whatever I wanted. By January, I was up to 190, quite fluffy. Now, not all of that was fat, much was water and bloat. But I still had to drop about 20 pounds before I could start displaying my new pull-up gains. Now, the cut didn't take long, but I didn't start testing maxes again until I was a reasonable body fat percentage. That's when most of the PRs came in one shot. What's cool is that I hadn't tested maxes in months, yet still hit lifetime bests across multiple variations. How? Because all the heavy hypertrophy work I did during my bulk paid off. And I held on to those strength gains as I leaned out. One thing I've noticed, I'm at my absolute strongest around 12% body fat. When I drop below that, my total pull-up dips a bit, even though the external weight looks more impressive to someone who doesn't know my actual body weight. The only real advantage to being leaner is my one-arm pull-up, but honestly, that's more so a display of strength. If you already built a big weighted pull-up and then cut down while practicing the one-arm pull-up, you'll see progress super fast because the strength was already there. I managed to improve both my external load and my total load. So the programming I'm sharing works. And the way I did it was through this very simple training. Just 2 sets on pull-ups using the main variations I talked about before with 1 back down set of behind the neck pull-ups. Sometimes I do straight sets of 4 to 6 reps. Other times, 1 top set and 1 back down set in the 5 to 8 rep range. Usually, it was 3 plates for the first set and then 2 plates for the second set. Since I was using weaker grips, that was more than enough weight. And even then, doing 10 dead hang reps with strict controlled form is hard enough if you're fatigued from your first heavy set, or in general if you're going wider. So that was the primary pull-up programming, which is so simple. I know, right? Alongside the Arnold 50, though in my case it was more like an Arnold 100, which I did at the end, but more on that soon. I train pull-ups every 72 hours. That's the rule I always stress in my videos. And I rotated grips every 3 weeks. Now, after pull-ups, I would perform a lat pull down and a stable row. So we're talking about 6 to 7 heavy sets max for back, done twice a week. The lat pull down was my ghetto version with grip rotation every 3 weeks. And I always used my cable inverted row, the one that everyone laughs at me for, but it was my main row for the last 3 years, from my contest prep until now. And honestly, it's superior to most machine rows. I'm dying on this hill. I worked up to 315 on this row, which is 7 plates. At 6 plates, it was locked in. But 7 was pushing the limits of stability. The range of motion is naturally shorter, like a lengthened partial. Since the bar hits your belly button, think of a flipped up Yates row. The back support allows for maximum motor unit recruitment without wrecking your ribs or sternum, which is a common problem on chest support rows that I still suffer from to this day. The wide stance also helps with stability. Still, once the load doubled my body weight, it started rocking me up. So that's when I knew I milked the movement for all it was worth. But by then, the carryover to weighted pull-ups couldn't be ignored. Because if you recall, a couple years ago, I was doing inverted rows with a backpack on. Well, this allows you to go heavier and it replicates that movement pattern. So once I hit 7 plates on the ghetto row, I then switched over to seal rows, which humbled me all over again. So I rotate between a cambered easy bar, the new Omni bar by Bells of Steel and Bald Omni-Man, and a straight bar. The straight bar isn't much easier, by the way, even though it's a lengthened partial. Most guys won't go past 275. Now I set the incline bench to the lowest setting, so having short arms is convenient, but if you can't give full extension, just widen your grip and or stack mats underneath the bench. But if that's not realistic, you can angle the bench to 45 degrees, but then understand that it becomes a traditional rowing angle, which is not the same exercise. Some guys do seal rows with dumbbells, and that's a perfectly reasonable option. The point is, pick a stable row that isn't a hassle to set up or repeat. For me, I just park my bench in front of the rack, unrack the bar from low J hooks, and start horsing those reps. You gotta be explosive here. And regarding ghetto lat pull downs, it's a diagonal angle, and if you ever trained sagittal pulls, you will know that they're much harder than vertical pulls. Just to say, I can max out the 300-pound stack at the gym, even near the end of a cut, but I can only do 250 at home, yet it feels so much harder. Not from instability, I have to stress that, but just because of the angle. And if you don't believe me, just try this yourself. Set up an iliac pull down, which is basically the same exercise, with a bench for chest support. And compare it to your vertical pull down numbers, it is not even close. Now, what makes this combo work is that I would do all my hardest pull-up variations first to fix the weak links, then use a sagittal pull down to avoid pure vertical pulling redundancy, and then finish with a stable row where I could just drive everything into my lats with an underhand grip without the erector fatigue. Since I already hit erectors very hard on good mornings, which I built up to 415 pounds on that using the Hatfield style. So ironically, my best pull-up PRs usually came when I dropped bent over rows and focused more so on stable options that let me recruit pure upper back. Now, I'm not bashing bent over rows. I still love them. I still program them, but this has worked best for me specifically during pull-up specialization phases. I've made videos about this before, so this is not a contradiction. There's context for everything. All right, so those were the main compound accessories that fit into my weighted pull-up journey. During the peaking phase, which didn't last long, it was maybe a month and a half, I reintroduced the max effort method and dropped my volume a bit, which is, again, very simple. All I did was drop the sagittal pull down entirely and only do weighted pull-ups and seal rows. And sometimes it wasn't even 2 sets. It was just working up to one top ramping set. So you can reduce your training volume, but you don't want to train like that year round. I do think adding in the pull down enhances the system. So every pull-up usually started with a top set, hitting a heavy single as a true max, followed by 1 to 2 back down sets with slightly lighter weight, or sometimes just 2 straight sets. So the programming wasn't all that different, just a bit reduced with some heavy singles in there. And I didn't bother with 3 sets of 10 at 70% or any high rep work. If I'm being honest, I rarely do high reps on weighted pull-ups unless it's an occasional AMRAP or a body weight finisher. But it's not for the main work, and even then it's for the last set to failure. On non-max effort days, since I only did it once a week, I didn't do double max effort this time, I kept things simple with 2 sets of 4 to 6 reps. Always rotating grips every 3 weeks, just like I did in my base building phase. As for higher reps and injuries, golfer's elbow definitely flared up during my Road to 405 bench series, about 2 months out from peaking. And what really helped me out was Mark Rippetoe's cure, which is the classic Arnold 50 method. That is high sets of low rep chin-ups. This is designed to spark an inflammatory cascade into your tendons so that they finally heal. Letting it rest is apparently the worst thing you can do for a tendinopathy. You want to keep actively pushing the area with tons of sets and blood flow. Movement is medicine. After about 5 workouts, the pain typically starts to ease up. For me, it took around 8 sessions, but it worked. And it brought my work capacity way up after not doing much high volume pull-ups for a long time. The best part is, I did this in bear mode, not when I was already lean. So all those sets were brutal with only 30 to 60 seconds of rest. Like dynamic effort training. You could say this was my substitute. So I'd rotate grips every set, close chin-ups, medium and wide, and eventually super wide once my elbows can handle it. When the elbows were 100%, I didn't stop with the Arnold 50. I kept doing this as a finisher, but now I added weight. Imagine, I'm fully bulked up and I'd be having 45 pounds hanging off my waist and I'm banging out 20 sets of 5, no problem, after a full back workout and curls. That kind of workload seriously leveled up my pull-up strength, no doubt about it. And it reminds me of my classic calisthenics days, which really got me thinking. Training pull-ups in a pre-exhausted state actually works better than most lifters realize. And this eventually led me to adding top-end overload finishers. This is for my advanced guys. Midway through my cut, I included a dedicated arm day, which I've since dropped, but it was mainly to bring up my lagging biceps. So after going all in on curls, I would then finish with jumping ring chin-ups. I chose rings because they're easier on the elbows. And I can set the height so that my arms are slightly bent when I land, which lets me aggressively pull from a dead stop. It is a pure concentric power move, so it doesn't accumulate a bunch of muscle damage, and you can overload the top like nothing else. At first, I could only do 2 plates after all those curls. My arms were totally shot. So I'll do reps of 12 to 15 to failure and beyond until I physically couldn't extend my arms even an inch. And as I adapted, because it was just pain at the beginning, I ramped it up to 3, 3.5, 4 plates, and eventually 200 pounds. So when you're pulling 200 pounds, aka your projected 1 rep max, doing so after a full arm day you're not getting many reps, maybe 5, barely clearing the rings. But those contractions at the top are everything. And they still count towards effective reps, making your biceps cramp and hurt like hell. And for me, the weighted pull-up was always limited by top end strength. I'm explosive off the bottom, but I've always struggled grinding through the top half. So those overloads directly address my weak link. Kind of like how powerlifters use board presses to overload their tricep sticking point. That single tweak made a huge difference in my ability to grind and hold that position. Now, I've shown the jumping technique before. As I say, it's the CJ bunny hop from San Andreas. But honestly, it's the best substitute I've found for accommodating resistance. And all of you could do it, so no excuses. It's accessible. Think of it as the push press of weighted pull-ups. Last year, I used to do a lot of weighted pull-ups with chains, but I'll tell you that this is just as good. Mix in both though, especially if you have the setup. Just do a mini jump or calf raise into your pull-up, which smooths out the resistance profile and gives you intense contractions at the top. Holding an isometric up there builds specific strength that also radiates through your top end range. So I never bothered with slow negatives and isometrics by jumping off a box like what most guys recommend. I got everything I needed from this overloaded concentric. And I do believe it might be better than top end pause reps with less weight. In addition, and on a connected note, I started doing chin to bar pull-ups, especially with a super wide grip, because the tactile feedback is important. Remember, strength radiates about 15 degrees in all directions. So just getting your chin to the bar helps you crush reps just above or below it. So this range of motion became my go-to, but I always did a dead hang at the bottom. And here's the crazy part. I didn't even realize that with super wides, because the bar is cambered, getting my chin over is comparable to doing clavicle to bar reps on a normal grip. Combine that with the fact that you physically can't bend your arms as much with a wide diagonal grip, and explains why they're so tough. Once I shifted to just bringing my chin to the bar, no higher, suddenly it felt like a proper comp style rep with a medium grip. And even the carryover was higher. That's what finally broke through my top end plateau. By that same logic, I had to directly address my biceps because they've always been a weak link. I'm still torso dominant, and my biceps are not a genetic strong point, so exercise selection, especially for isolations, does matter. You want to think how it can feed into your pull-ups. So after years of experimenting, I've learned over and over that nothing beats a heavy barbell curl. Every time I hit a new pull-up PR, coincidentally, I'm always pushing my barbell curls at the same time, and the carryover is obvious. See, I've tried every curl variation there is. And while some might be better for pure hypertrophy, nothing lets you overload like the barbell curl. And nothing transfers over better to heavy bar pull-ups, especially bar chin-ups. It helps with grinding through the top of the rep. And even when I use a little bit of cheat form, the transference stays high. So you can't go wrong no matter how you do your curls. And for the last year and a half, this has been my go-to biceps builder. Just like it was years ago when I hit those initial PRs in my minimalist gym. Imagine, now I have everything and I'm doing barbell curls. But guess what? I curl 135, aka a plate, for 5 to 6 reps at 160 body weight with decent form. The only con though, sometimes golfer's elbow pops up given the restrictiveness of barbells. So I'm always rotating bars to prevent overuse. That's the solution. So if I'm barbell curling twice a week, I make sure it's never the same variation. And I'll switch up both variations every 3 weeks, exactly like I do with my hypertrophy-based pull-ups. I rotate straight bars, 2 types of easy bars, one with a curve, one with a more traditional angle, and I alternate between close and moderate grips for all these bars. But I try not to make close my default, since that's harder on the elbows, but it's cool that you can't lift as much with your arms pinned in, so it's a good way to get more or less weight. I also throw in fat bar curls, which are amazing for forearm strength and very helpful for overloading your pull-ups. And again, it's easier on the elbows given the larger surface area. With the fat bar, I also love doing floor curls, which are basically strict curls from the floor. The even tension and harder loading the lengthened position makes them more difficult in general. But the floor provides extra stability with less axial fatigue. Floor curls and strict curls are essentially interchangeable, and both are in my rotation for that reason. If my strict curl improves, so does my chin up and vice versa. Right now, I'm strict curling 115 for reps, which isn't anything special, but my goal is to strict curl my body weight for 1 rep max and hit a plate for reps. If I can do that, I sincerely believe that alone can unlock a 5-plate pull-up, assuming my back keeps its strength. That's how much biceps are holding me back. And then one last thing I've changed. These days, I'll sometimes train biceps before back, and I don't notice a big drop in strength. Maybe I'll lose 4 to 5 reps, but I'd rather work in a lower rep range and have my biceps fail faster, since again, they're my weak point. All the exercise selection points to that, and I just need to become more arm dominant and train my worst grips. And remember, hitting milestone PRs like adding a plate comes from years of consistency and stacking those plus ones over time. Every bit adds up, and one day you'll be repping your old 1 rep max. So that's it, guys. Hope you learned a lot about my pull-up programming. If you got any questions, drop them in the comments section and I'll clarify anything that you need. So stick with hard pull-ups, 100 week links, and I'll talk to you next time.